Well, good evening, everyone. We're about to start our Keeping the Dream Alive series in just a moment or two. We will give it one more minute to let any of the stragglers join. So, yeah, we'll be with you shortly. All right, well, maybe we'll get started now. Good evening, and thank you for joining Tier 1 Travel's exclusive series, Keeping the Dream Alive. My name is Shelley Perry, General Manager here at Tier 1 Travel, and tonight we're heading overseas to the country that most recently hosted the 2021 Summer Olympics. We're heading to Japan. Carson Muir from Abercrombie and Kent, a good friend of Tier 1 Travel, will be our host for tonight's adventure. Carson is Sales Director for the Upper Midwest and Canada region, currently living in downtown Chicago with his wife Megan and their rescue dog Milo. Carson grew up living in Brussels and then Kuala Lumpur and has traveled extensively throughout both Europe and Asia. Now, Japan truly is a land of incredible contrasts. From neon skylights and speeding bullet trains to imposing castles and breathtaking islands, it's a destination that will leave you definitely in awe. But enough of me trying to describe it. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Carson.
Thank you so much, Shelley, and greetings from Chicago, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you all and very excited to have my colleague Gerald Hatherley from our regional office in Hong Kong joining us as well. Good morning, Gerald.
Good morning.
We are delighted to be a part of the Keeping the Dream Alive series. It's been such a great initiative by the Tier 1 Travel team to stay connected during the past 18 months and keep us focused on what we can control, and that's looking forward and planning our future travels. So we certainly love working with all of the talented travel advisors at Tier 1 Travel and appreciate all the wonderful clients who have taken the time to join us this evening. I'll quickly give a couple housekeeping notes that we do have you all in listen-only mode for the presentation tonight. And we did enact the question box, which is at the bottom of the screen. So that's where you can engage with us and share any comments or ask any questions. And we're going to save some time at the end of the presentation this evening to get to those questions and be happy to answer any questions you have throughout the presentation. Now, let's focus on Abercrombie and Kent as kind of a global company first, and then we'll jump into Japan. So Abercrombie and Kent has been around for over 60 years, and we've grown into a leading global luxury travel company focused on delivering inspiring experiences across all 7 continents. Our network of 55 offices throughout the world is really our competitive advantage, and we help take you beyond the guidebook and truly immerse yourself in authentic local experiences. And we're there when you travel with us to support your trip every step of the way. We have a portfolio of products that include small group journeys, luxury expedition cruises, and journeys by private jet. But our specialty and really what we're going to focus most of our time on this evening is creating private custom travel trips. And so this is where Gerald and I get to collaborate with your Tier 1 travel advisor and really curate a one-of-a-kind itinerary that perfectly matches your preferences. We're so excited to focus on Japan. It's a very popular and top-selling destination for us at A&K, and it's really seen across all of our product lines I just mentioned. Within the small group journey space, you can join one of our Classic Japan departures, which is a 9-day trip throughout Japan that includes stops in Tokyo, Hakone, Osaka, and Kyoto. These are led by English-speaking resident tour directors from the Japan region. Or you can join, if you're a cruiser, you can join one of our luxury expedition cruises. We have a Wonders of Japan trip that takes place during the cherry blossom season and does a 14-day semi-circumnavigation of the country. And even our Around the World by Private Jet trips, the Wildlife Safari, That starts in Seattle, but its first stop is Japan. And they spend a few days in Tokyo with a day trip up to Nagano, Japan, to see the endangered snow monkeys in their natural habitat, bathing in the hot springs. So if you want to learn more about any of our trips, please talk to your Tier 1 travel advisor, and we'll be happy to get you all the information you need and introduce you to the world of A&K. Now let's take the deep dive into the wonderful destination of Japan. And there's no one better to do this than my friend and colleague, Gerald Hatherley, who is a Canadian national, but also a Hong Kong permanent resident. He's worked for A&K for 35 years and is a 19-time recipient of the Condé Nast Traveler magazine's Top Travel Specialist Award for this region. Gerald is fluent in Mandarin and works as a translator in his free time. So we're super excited to have him here with us this evening to take us over to Japan. And I'll hand the mic over to Gerald to show us everything that Japan has to offer.
Well, thank you very much, Carson. And first, Shelley, thank you very much for allowing us to join you this evening and talk a bit about Japan. And as Carson said and Shelley said, really, this is a terrific destination. And tonight, the presentation I'm going to give is in two parts. One, I want to take you on a bit of a trip through Japan, that as we call the wonders of Japan. And then after that, talk about what we see for the future in terms of the post-COVID period of travel in Japan, because it has so much to offer, not only in its culture and history, but its incredible landscapes. And just to begin, is just a quick update. I think you're all aware and probably saw the Olympics, and Japan handled an incredible challenge. You know, they were postponed in 2020 because of the pandemic, and again, faced the challenge of a new surge in 2021, yet carried off the Olympics beautifully. And I think that speaks to the character of the people and just what a wonderful country it is. So the Japanese government is looking forward to the day when travel will reopen. But based on our reports from our office in Tokyo and what we read in the news, I don't think that Japan will fully reopen until at least the spring of 2022. If things do improve, they'll probably open up for limited regional travel into the country, but they're aiming for a date of around March 2022 to reopen. So as we dream the time before they can reopen, let's take a short trip to start. I call this the wonders of Japan, and this I think is a great introduction to the country. It introduces both the culture, the history, and the people. And I think it's a great teaser for any future trips to the country. As you can see on the map, this focuses on the island of Honshu. Now, Japan has 4 main islands: Hokkaido, Honshu, Shikoku, and Kyushu. In addition to that, they have hundreds of other smaller islands. This itinerary is essentially a 2-week itinerary. And as Carson mentioned, we do lots of different varieties of tailor-made programs. So this is just one type of suggested itinerary. And of course, all trips, no matter how many times you go to Japan, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to start in Tokyo. We call this the gateway to the country. It's been the capital of Japan since 1868. So in essence, it represents the modern development of Japan. Prior to that, Kyoto was the capital for over 1,000 years. Tokyo is where everything happens. The greater Tokyo area has a population of 38 million people. So we can say this is the heart and soul of the country of modern Japan. Everything in terms of what's new, what's happening, food, fashion, it all begins in Tokyo. Now, one of the first things I'd like to get across is, often people think of Japan and they think of the cherry blossom season. Japan is a year-round destination, so please remember that. In any season of the year, there's lots to do and see. This slide I've put up is just Japan during the Christmas, New Year season. And even though the Japanese don't celebrate Christmas, they love the idea of Christmas. So throughout the city of Tokyo, you'll have wonderful illuminations like this scene you can see here. Each of the major districts or wards of the city have wonderful light shows. Of course, in the spring, we all know Japan for hanami, the viewing of the sakura or the cherry blossoms. Tokyo is no exception. Throughout the city, in its parks, along its canals, around the Imperial Palace, you have this incredible sea of pink and white cherry blossoms. This is very special to the Japanese because they feel the cherry blossom represents the ephemeral nature of life, how quickly we pass through life. So take the time to enjoy the cherry blossoms. Summertime in Tokyo, beautiful gardens, parks, and shrines. And of course, in the autumn, Japan, like Canada, and parts of the Northeast US is ablaze in autumn glory. Whether it's the yellow, the ginkgo, or the reds of the maple, Japan is one of the great autumn destinations of the world. So with that, quickly, let's start, to talk a little bit about what makes Tokyo so fascinating. It is a city, it's modern, it's innovative, but it's also deeply rooted in its traditional cultures. So when we visit Tokyo, one of the first places we like to go is the Meiji Shrine. This is where you can see the heart and soul of Japanese tradition. This is one of the most important Shinto shrines. It's dedicated to the Emperor Meiji, who in the late 19th century opened Japan to the world. Now, on any day of the week, you'll often see a young married couple going to be blessed at the Meiji Shrine. So they're dressed in their beautiful traditional robes, yet just a 5-minute walk away from Meiji, we take you to Harajuku. This is one of the happening districts of Tokyo. This is why I say it's all about fashion and innovation in Tokyo, especially on the weekend, when you'll see young people dressed in their cosplay, the costumes of their favorite anime characters. And it's just a sense of, what's happening in modern Tokyo. And speaking of innovation, Tokyo is home to one of the most, I think, delightful sites. This is called Team Lab. Now, there are 2 sites of Team Lab in Tokyo. And it's sort of a group of filmmakers, IT specialists, and people involved in virtual reality. And what they've done is created these living art exhibitions where you, as the visitor, become part of that art exhibition. Now, in 2019, over Christmas, I took my wife and 2 sons to Tokyo, and we visited both Team Lab sites, and we spent hours in each. It really is an incredible experience. Another thing about Japan or modern Tokyo is anime or animation. The Japanese are world famous for their wonderful, whimsical animated films. There is a wonderful museum called the Ghibli Museum in the western part of Tokyo, and this celebrates, the sheer whimsy of Japanese animation. When you go and visit this site, they have a sign that says, "To all adults, before you enter, remember your childhood." So this is a great trip into, the nostalgia of animation. And Tokyo is also a major center for contemporary art. Now, we have ANK, I failed to mention, I apologize. We have an office on the ground, staffed by 15 tour professionals, a wonderful team of guides, and we have a great network of resources. So if you have travelers who are interested in the art scene, we're very fortunate to work with some great art specialists like this young woman you see here, who can take you behind the scenes to see private collections, to go to galleries, and learn what's happening in terms of today's contemporary art in Tokyo. Also, we all know Japan's famous for its cuisine, and we've paid special attention, especially in our tailor-made programs, to introduce you to the incredible variety of Japanese cuisine. Of course, everyone knows about their love for seafood, and so we can do that in many ways. We can take you to the great fish markets like Kyosu and Tsukiji Market, where you can see the tuna auction in the early morning, or we can take you for a sushi making class. But also on occasion, there are special things like this crab auction in the photo you can see. This crab, this was taken in 2020, I believe. This crab auctioned off for 46,000 US dollars. That just shows you how much the Japanese love their seafood. But let's not forget Tokyo is the center for sport, both international and traditional. And of course, we often get requests for sumo. Now, there are 2 ways that you can experience sumo in Japan. One, of course, is to go to a tournament. Now, please remember that tournaments, sumo tournaments, are seasonal and they move about the country. So you're not guaranteed to get to see, go to a sumo tournament. So the other option, a very special arrangement that we have because of our on-site presence, is to take you into a sumo stable. The sumo stable is the training ground for young sumo wrestlers. And this is where not only do they learn to wrestle, but they learn, more importantly, the philosophy of sumo. Sumo has a history of over 1,500 years in Japan, and it's tied intimately to Shinto belief and one's place within nature. So when you go to the sumo stable, not only do you see the young wrestlers training, you learn about how the apprentice sumo wrestler trains with a senior wrestler. He makes his bed, he cleans his room, he prepares his food, and most importantly, he sits and listens to the philosophy of sumo. So it's a great insight into the culture of sumo. But I mentioned Tokyo has got great international sport. There is baseball learned from the Americans. It's one of their most popular national pastimes. Japan is fast becoming a major soccer power in Asia, and the Japanese love rugby. 2 years ago, they hosted the World Rugby Cup, so it's all there in Tokyo if you want. But we also like to encourage a little fun and experiential experiences in Tokyo, whether it's spending an hour or two learning the way of the samurai with swordplay, or learning taiko drumming, which is part of the royal imperial tradition of Japan, or taking some time to go hiking at Mount Takao, just outside, where you get wonderful views of Mount Fuji. But also for travelers to Tokyo, there are great day trips, and two of the best. One is to Nikko, which is 2.5 hours north of Tokyo. It's one of the great national parks for scenery, but it's also a very important site for history. This is where the leaders of the Tokugawa clan, these were the shoguns that ruled Japan from 1603 to 1867, are buried. And the other is to Kamakura. I think you all know this lovely image of the bronze Buddha, one of the biggest in the world. These are all accessible from Tokyo. But enough about Tokyo. Let's get on our Shinkansen bullet train and head out on this Wonders of Japan trip. And we're going to first visit Hakone. Hakone is just 43 minutes by bullet train from Tokyo, downtown Tokyo Station. It is called Tokyo's Back Garden. It is part of the Fuji Hakone Izu National Park. It is a wonderful contrast to Tokyo. Here you've got the best views of Mount Fuji. It's a region of great hiking trails, forests, beautiful lakes, and interestingly enough, great art. Hakone is home to the Outdoor Sculpture Museum, the biggest museum of its kind in the world. 19 acres of beautifully manicured grounds with incredible sculpture from around the world. And in addition, they now have a Picasso gallery where they have 700 pieces of Picasso's drawings, lithographs, and sketches. And after spending 2 nights in Hakone, on this Wonders of Japan trip, we then drive into the interior of Honshu to the Japanese Alps to visit 2 incredible regions. One is the town of Takayama. Takayama is in the foothills of the Japanese Alps. It is one of the best places to get a sense of old Japan. It's got wonderful 19th century architecture. Each spring and each autumn, Takayama hosts a wonderful festival, the spring and autumn festivals. And while in Takayama, we take a day to go to Shirakawa-go. Shirakawa-go is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. As you can see in the slides, in summer or in winter, this is the site of some historic samurai villages, originally built by samurai in the 16th and 17th centuries. They're the last of their kind anywhere in Japan, and they're built in a very traditional gazo style of architecture, which are these, sort of A-frame thatched roof buildings. And it's a wonderful sort of trip into old Japan. And while in Takayama, if you're interested, we have a great relationship with a sommelier of sake. So one evening we can arrange for you to have a sake tasting experience. And sake, like good French wine, there are different grades, different types, and a lot of fun can be had. Now, our trip across central Japan takes us to the Sea of Japan, the West Coast, to what I think is my favorite city in Japan, and that is Kanazawa. Kanazawa is a big Japanese city that is thoroughly Japanese. There isn't a lot of overt Western influence, so it's a great experience in any season of the year. It is home, first and foremost, to one of the most beautiful gardens on earth. This is the Kenru-Unken Garden. It's considered one of the 3 classical gardens of Japan, and it's beautiful in any season of the year. But even more important, when you go to Kanazawa, you really get a sense of Japan's history. Here, they have the only samurai district in all of the country. In the late 19th century, the Emperor Meiji, who I mentioned in Tokyo, one of his great reforms was to disband the samurai warriors. Many of them retired to Kanazawa, and today they have preserved the samurai district, where you can have a wonderful walking tour that ends up, as you can see in this lovely garden, at Nomura House. This is a museum to the samurai experience. Another great tradition in Kanazawa is geisha. Now, we'll talk about geisha in Kyoto as well, but Kanazawa has truly authentic geisha for the Japanese public, not just for international tourists. There are actually 3 geisha districts in Kanazawa, so it's a great place to photograph and get a sense of the whole tradition. And it's also a seat for Japan's great theatrical traditions, both kabuki and no. So we often encourage our visitors to, spend one evening attending one of these performances. And for me, one of the most special experiences in Kanazawa is the tea ceremony. Now, of course, tea ceremony can be had anywhere in the country. I particularly like Kanazawa because we have a lovely relationship with a family. This family owns a private garden that's almost 350 years old. And the seventh generation tea master in the family is a lovely woman, Junko Asai, and she allows us to take our travelers into the garden and up to their tea house. This tea house was also 350 years old, and her family served tea each day to the shogun, to the ruler of Kanazawa for several hundred years. And what's so great about this experience is that she speaks fluent English and she explains step by step the philosophical meaning of the tea ceremony. So you see the four characters, ichi yi hui. In Japanese, this means our one chance to meet. So the tea ceremony is more than just serving tea, it's bringing people together. And finally, in Kanazawa, you've got great food traditions. They have a wonderful seafood market called Omicho Market. Kanazawa continues to be a great center for traditional arts, whether it's gold leaf, textile dyeing, or ceramics. Kanazawa really is this great repository of history. Now, saying all that, you get on another train. This time we take the Thunderbird Express, and all rail lines lead, of course, to Kyoto, which remains one of the greatest of all Japanese cities. In fact, it has been voted several times one of the world's great international travel destinations. It has, as I mentioned, was the capital of Japan from the late 8th century to 1868. So 1,000 years of imperial Japanese history and tradition. So when you go to Kyoto, we'll quickly show you some of the great iconic sites. This is Kinkakuji. This is the Golden Temple. It's probably the most iconic site in all of Kyoto. And this is the Fushinara Tashai Shrine, a great Shinto shrine famous for its beautiful torii gates. Now, this is a shrine devoted to the goddess or deity of rice, which is a symbol of prosperity in business. But Kyoto, as you know, is known for its incredible gardens. This is Saihoji, the moss garden. So Kyoto is just this incredible repository of gardens and temples and shrines. And when we bring travelers to Kyoto, we like to have experiences. It's one thing to see the sights, but it's even better to experience the tradition. So we can organize a Zen Buddhist meditation class in the early morning in a local temple. Of course, if you don't do the tea ceremony in Kanazawa, we can prepare one in Kyoto. We can take you behind the scenes to see incredible Zen gardens, or visit Arashiyama, the beautiful bamboo groves and forests, where you can either walk or bicycle. And of course, the Gion in Kyoto is the home of the geisha tradition in Kyoto. We can organize a wonderful private geisha experience at night to give you, further insight into this wonderful tradition. But we're most fortunate, again, because being on the ground, we have wonderful resource contacts. One of those is a gentleman named Alex Kerr, as you can see in this photo. Alex is considered one of the greatest living resources on Japanese culture. He is American by birth, but Japanese by heart. He has a PhD in Japanese studies from Yale University. He has lived in Kyoto since 1976. He has written 12 books in Japanese about the disappearing culture of Japan. And Alex can kindly, upon request, take our FIT travelers on behind the scenes tours to see the old Kyoto, the back neighborhood gardens and shrines, or on occasion, we can visit his beautiful home. He lives in a 400-year-old Japanese house on the grounds of a Shinto shrine. So Alex really is truly immersed in Japanese history and culture. And I didn't mention earlier about accommodation, but everyone knows in Japan, there's a wonderful tradition called the ryokan. Ryokan is a traditional Japanese inn, but it's more than just an inn. It's all about hospitality, warmth, and the genuine heart of the Japanese people. So we strongly recommend at some point on your trip to Japan to take time to spend 1 or 2 nights in a ryokan. And Kyoto is home to some incredible ryokan. And again, we have wonderful relationships. Many of these are family owned, and many, like the Tararaya, has a history of over 500 years. And Kyoto is all about day trips. So when you're in Kyoto, you can make a day trip to Hiroshima. We all know Hiroshima for, its part at the end of World War II. And of course, that is very important to see. But also Hiroshima is home to one of the most beautiful islands in Japan. That is Miyajima Island, the island of shrines. Or you can make a day trip to Nara. Nara is just about 45 minutes from Kyoto. It was the first capital of Japan prior to Kyoto. It is one of the great roots or seats of Buddhism in Japan. So you have wonderful day trip options. Now, having done this trip, you exit through Osaka. But now let's talk about how we see the future of travel in Japan. And we really, over the period of the pandemic, have been doing a lot of work to research other areas of Japan and experiences. And what we've gleaned from this is you need to get off the beaten path, because one of the things I've learned over the pandemic is 69% of Japan's land is still forested. So Japan has incredible landscapes and nature. Now, first, if you are just making a trip to Tokyo and you don't have all that much time, there is a wonderful new experience of glamping, glamorous camping in a great place called Hakuba. Hakuba is in the Japanese Alps. Now, Carson mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, Nagano, which is also in the Alps. So Hakuba is just beyond Nagano. So it's really accessible from Tokyo. This glamping site has 8 tents. Each tent is 1,000 square feet. So it's got wonderful spacious accommodation, fully en suite. It has a Michelin star chef and a team of naturalists who take you on nature or hiking walks during the daytime. Then at night, you have a beautiful Michelin star dinner, and they finish it with a string quartet. I mean, really, this is one of the best ways to see nature in Japan. And also, that's something that's really exciting for us as travelers to Japan is a boat called the Gun-2. Gun-2 is the world's only floating ryokan. They've converted a ship into 19 ryokan suites, complete with a Japanese onsen spa. Why we're so excited about this is because this ship sails in the inland sea. Now, the inland sea, as you can see on the map, is located in the southeastern part of Honshu, and it visits 3 very important islands, collectively known as Nawashima. Nawashima has become not just the most important art center in Japan, but perhaps all of Asia, if not one of the great sites in the world. Nawashima is 3 islands, Nawashima, Tashima, and Inojima. On these islands are galleries, art installations, museums, live performance art. And so it's become a mecca for anyone interested in art. Now, prior to the launching of the Gun-2, the only accommodation on the main island of Nawashima is a very eclectic hotel called the Benesse House. However, Benesse House has got limited accommodation, so it was often a challenge for anyone who wanted to visit Nawashima. So today you've got the Gun-2 as another option because they include a day visit to Nawashima on their itineraries. And another new great product is called the 7-star luxury train. If you have people that are train aficionados, and there are lots of people who love, of course, as Canadians, we love the Rocky Mountaineer. The 7-star luxury train is a beautiful train on the island of Kyushu, which is the most southern of the 4 main islands. This is modeled on the Venice Simplon Orient Express train. As you can see, the appointments and accommodation are really beautiful. And it's a wonderful way for someone who's been to Tokyo, been to Osaka and Kyoto to see something different in Japan. And they run on 2- and 4-day itineraries. And Kyushu is a beautiful island. So this really meets the needs of the luxury traveler and to see something different in Japan. Now, for us, one of our most exciting new experiences, however, is something called a day with the Ama. This is a region of Japan called Ise Shima. It's a peninsula south of Nagoya on the Pacific Ocean. Ama is a term used for the sea maidens or pearl divers. I think we've all seen these photos at some time in our lives. These very courageous women, today there are about 800 left. And this is how Mikimoto pearls started. They would dive down to harvest the natural pearls that the oysters produced. So we have a special experience where we visit an Ama village. We have lunch with the Ama, and then they take you out to see them dive. Now, these women can dive down to depths of over 20 meters and hold their breath for over 2 minutes. This is really a disappearing tradition. But for me, one of the most exciting things is hiking in Japan. As I noted, Japan is 69% forested. And today, and the Japanese love nature, it's part of the Shinto tradition. And there are wonderful hiking routes based on a historic tradition called the Nakasendo Way. Nakasendo refers to the old postal roads that linked Kyoto to Tokyo between the 17th and 19th centuries. Today, they've refurbished or changed these postal roads into wonderful walking routes. So you can hike for a day, 2 days, 3 days, as much as you like. And what's so great is not only do you see the beautiful nature, you visit tiny villages that are fast disappearing. And these are some of the last bastions to the really traditional Japanese art forms like pottery and box making. It's just a really great experience. And this is some of the scenery that you can see en route while hiking. But I also want to note that Japan's become a great winter destination, hence why we say it's a year-round country to visit. Hokkaido in the far north, the most northern island, has become very famous for its skiing and snowboarding. Among the many great resorts is Niseko, which is one of the larger and more international of the Japanese ski resorts. I know we have Whistler in Canada, but I'll tell you, Niseko receives 15 meters, over 50 feet of fresh powder snow a year. They've got ski and ski out facilities, English-speaking ski instruction, and it really is your base. If you want to visit Japan in the winter, do some skiing and then head south. And in addition, Sapporo, the capital of Hokkaido, has a great ice festival. It really is a winter wonderland. And in the summer, Hokkaido is great for its beautiful flowers. It is truly a rainbow, whether it's lavender or roses. It's a great place to visit in the summer. And it is also home to Japan's original indigenous people, the Ainu. Like our First Nations, these are the first inhabitants of Japan. They are fast disappearing, but you can visit some Ainu settlements during the summer months. And in closing, island hopping. We mentioned the 4 main islands, but Japan is home to hundreds of other islands. These are the Ryukyu Islands. They run from Kyushu down to Taiwan. They are becoming a great sort of getaway resort option for visitors to Japan. The main island you probably know of is Okinawa, but there are other islands like Ishigaki, Iriomote, and Miyakojima. They have pristine beaches, coral reefs, and great airlift from Tokyo, Osaka, Hong Kong, or Shanghai. And this is Iriomote Island, just to show you how beautiful and pristine these islands are. So they make for a nice contrast to a trip to the main islands. And one of the other Ryukyu Islands is Yakushima. It has some of the oldest forests on Earth, great for hiking. But if you really want to get away from it all, if you have a traveler who's not seen and done it all, you go to the Ogasawara Islands, another group of Japanese islands called the Galapagos of Asia. These are 1,000 kilometers south of Tokyo, accessible once a week by ship, and they have some of the healthiest coral reefs and the best whale watching in the world. But that's only if you've really traveled at all. And I'd like to close this off the beaten path with which I think is one of the most beautiful trips of all. This is on the island of Shikoku, which is one of the 4 main islands. This is called the Shikoku Pilgrimage. This is one of the great spiritual journeys of the world. I know people have traveled to Europe for some of the great Catholic pilgrimage routes. This is a Buddhist pilgrimage route. There are 88 temples built 1,000 years ago, linked by a wonderful hiking trail. For the Japanese, this is a great experience that you can try anytime in your life. You can visit 1 or 2 or as many temples as you want. The entire route is 1,200 kilometers. So that's probably a little bit much for an international traveler, but it is something that we can arrange. And it's a great chance to see the Japanese and their true deep ties to nature and to Buddhism. And to close, another thing we'd like to talk about is festivals. Japan is this modern nation, but its culture is tied to its festivals. So we often like to suggest to plan a trip around a festival. In the winter, you can go to Sapporo for the ice festival. In the spring, you can go to Takayama for their cherry blossom festival. Or in the summer, you can go to Kyoto for the Gion festival. All these celebrate the wonderful culture and traditions of Japan, as you can see in these slides. And Carson touched upon, I'll just briefly mention again, for our first-time traveler, A&K has a wonderful brochure tour called Classic Japan. As Carson mentioned, it's led by a resident Japanese English-speaking tour director who become your eyes to the country and to the traditions. And if you really want to see Japan in a very special way, I really think our Wonders of Japan, it's a once-a-year cruise that circumnavigates the 4 main islands. What's great about this trip is it visits smaller ports that the big ships cannot access. It goes with onboard Japan experts in art, architecture, and history. It's all inclusive. So everything is, included in the cost of the trip. So I think in just terms of economic value, it's one of the best ways to see Japan itself. And with that, the snow monkeys will join me in thanking you for giving us the time to rush through Japan like this. I really appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully one day you'll take the time to visit this incredible country. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gerald, for the wonderful presentation. I really love how you took us off the beaten path. And every time I watch your presentation on Japan, I learned something new. I got my eye on the Hokuba glamping experience. That's a new one for me.
Yeah.
Is that a year-round experience? It looks like it could be
I think
either
it's
snow or sun.
No, 3 seasons of the year, because I get very heavy snowfall and it's not really practical during the winter months, but spring, summer, autumn, it's a fantastic experience.
Awesome. Good to know. Adding
And
it
so
to my
accessible from
bucket list.
Tokyo.
Okay. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the questions box here. But we haven't seen these come through quite yet.
That's okay.
Gerald, go ahead and touch on, I know you mentioned before, talking about cherry blossom season. I think a lot of people seem to narrow it into March, but it is really a much longer season than many believe.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing about planning a trip to Japan. We all talk about cherry blossom, and I think people tend to focus on 2 cities, Kyoto and Tokyo. But if you look at a map of Japan, from south to north, it spans a distance, of over 1,000 miles. So of course, cherry blossom occurs at different, times in the spring. So for instance, there's early cherry blossom on the islands of Okinawa and the Ryukyu, or in Kyushu, as early as February. Then for the Kyoto-Tokyo corridor, it's really from about March 25th to April 10th. But one of our recommendations is to go north, up to northern Honshu and Hokkaido, where cherry blossoms don't really start blooming till late April into early May. And one of the great things about visiting Hokkaido is you don't have the crowds that you get. One of the things we have to manage expectations. When you go to Kyoto or Tokyo during cherry blossom, you go there with, it looks like most of the world sometimes, because so many people want to visit during those times. But if you want to get away from the crowds and still see incredible cherry blossoms, I think Hokkaido, like Hakodate, is a wonderful place to go, because you avoid the crowds and you still get, in Japan, there are over 200 different varieties of cherry blossom. So you really get to experience them all.
A great piece of advice. And I think keeps people's options open as far as when they can visit Japan and still get to experience all of the amazing things that they have to offer. I know that Japan is a destination that can easily be done as a single destination, but if people did want to visit another country while they're over in that area, where would you recommend combining with Japan?
Well, I think that a nice combination is 2, actually. One is Japan and South Korea. One, because they're so close, but yet they're very different cultures. And the other is Japan and China. We do a lot of Japan and China combinations. And the nice thing is and Japan, both of them draw a lot of their cultural heritage from China. So it's a sort of a nice sort of fit to include either Korea and Japan or Japan and China. And I did, I just wanted to emphasize, previously people, come to Asia, sometimes they want a beach destination. You can go on to the Philippines, which, we think is one of the great up and coming destinations of Asia too. So you could add a beach component in the Philippines as well. So, there's great airlift throughout East and Southeast Asia. So they're all doable.
Awesome. So Anita did come in with a question about possibly taking a group to Japan, and that's something that we certainly can help you out with, Anita, and work with Gerald and get a group of people to go on a private trip throughout the region.
Oh.
Shelley, do you have any questions for Gerald?
No, actually, I don't, and I'm very grateful that we're actually recording this, because Gerald, you gave us a ton of information, and that was so informative. Japan just has so much to offer.
Oh, sure does, Shelley. And we, as Carson said, we're here. We'd love to work with your travelers, and again, we truly appreciate this opportunity. And we're very hopeful that 2022 is going to be the year we're going to see a return to travel. So think of Japan, and we're here.
Yep, we certainly hope everyone's leaving with a little bit more wanderlust than they came with, and we appreciate everyone taking the time out of their evening to join us and learn from Gerald, who has so many years of experience in this region and just has a wealth of knowledge and would love to work with you and answer any questions that you may think of after the presentation. Email your travel advisor and they'll get them over to us, and we'll answer those questions and get them back to you. And we hope to have you join us somewhere across the world and hopefully in Japan in particular.
Wonderful. Again, thank you, Gerald, and thank you, Carson, for that informative presentation. Again, I can't read enough how much Japan has to offer. So, thank you to everybody for it. Thank you for everybody for attending. And like Carson said, I'll echo his sentiment that if you do have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to your Tier 1 travel consultant, and they will get those answers for you. But yes, thank you once again. And thank you for attending. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Excellent. And we'll
Yes,
save the
you too.
recording and send it out if you want to share it with any of your friends or family. And we look forward to keeping in touch.
You bet.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Sayonara.
Good night.
Good night. Good day.